Welcome, everyone. Simon Rosenberg, Hopium Chronicles, back with another wonderful event. Joining us today is Chairman Eric Croft, the chairman of the Alaska Democratic Party. Welcome, Chairman.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So listen, I'm really glad you're here because, we have been talking a lot at Hopium about the need for us to win in red states, to learn how to win in red states and red places in order to win the majority back and to make our chances of winning in the presidential election, greater next time. And Alaska's turning out, it could end up being sort of a national battleground state this cycle. And I really wanted you to come on and just give us the history. It's not a state that many people have worked in the Democratic Party or even visited, right, in many cases.
Come on up.
And so, come on up, right, particularly in the summer. But just if you could just give us the lay of the land, start really basic. I know you've had some good wins in the last couple of years, and I think bringing that along and then talking about how you're seeing 2026.
Love to, and thank you for putting me on the show. And it was fun meeting you in Little Rock, and that I keep coming back to a lot of the things we talked about in that short conversation. Alaska's. So I guess the message I want to say is we're both weird in what we do, and a little bit of a model for Western states to follow. And so we have legislative coalitions. I thought that was a little strange, maybe, with moderate R's and Democrats. I didn't realize till I started going to these national conferences, the one we met at, how just unique it is. I think Montana's playing with it now. Minnesota had a 50-50, so they had to do something. But legislative coalitions are really rare across the state, and we do them a lot. We right now we had 9 out of our 20 senators are Democrats. So you think, oh, you're in the minority. No, we're not. We joined with 5 moderate Republicans and made a coalition out of it. And then in the Senate, a similar thing. We had 14 of 40 of our representatives were Democrats. So you think, oh, that's bad news. No, there were 5 independents, pretty progressive independents, and 2 moderate Republicans. You add that up, that's 21 out of 40, and they have a majority, a pretty bare one. And they were able to do things like this year, override this horrible Republican governor's veto of education and put that money back. And so it's really, we've even had coalition governors where we had a moderate Republican governor and a Democratic lieutenant governor, and they split the cabinet. It was D's and R's, and we went to work. So that is a way out of this, maybe a model. We're searching for solutions with all the horrible things that are going on at the national level. I listened to your great interview with Nikki Fried from Florida. She's doing fabulous things there. She talked about how now 1/3 of Floridians are non-declared, right? They're not D or R. We've had 60% plus independent registration for decades now. And we've learned sort of how to work that, some of it is running independent sometimes. And a lot of my Democrats in the party are nervous about that. They don't want to lose the party. But I think I see it more as sometimes an independent in a seat can be a starter drug to getting to Democrats, right? It can be a way to transition that district over, get it more used to it if it can't quite make the leap. The larger challenge, if you just look at the national map, you don't have to be a genius. There are some geniuses out there, but I'm not. But you look at the map, we have to solve the South and the West, right? You just look at the big red portions. We have to keep what we traditionally had, and that's not easy. We need to get Florida back and, keep, get Ohio back and things like that. But really the challenge is if we write off, as we did for years, the South and the West, the math is really tough.
Yeah. And so let's just talk about this, right, for a second, because I think people will be surprised perhaps to hear about how things have worked there, because, we often talk about a pro-democracy coalition, one that is, Democrats and independents and former Republicans and former Republicans who may still be Republicans, but are alienated from the MAGA takeover. So is the Republican Party in Alaska then the ones that this coalition is working against? Is it very far right, which is why you've seen independents and moderate Republicans have the latitude to break from them? And what role does Lisa Murkowski and her kind of independence play in all this, in terms of just how this actually all works? Because it is, I've worked in every state in the country. There is nothing really like this anywhere else. And it's a really interesting model for what may happen in America as we see this increase of decline to states or independent people registering as independent.
Yeah, I served with Lisa in the House together before she went on up. I think she's a reflection rather than a creature of this idea of the independence. Like she embodied that. We get alternately pleased and frustrated with her, right? When she does a courageous vote, it's yay, she's great, and then she goes back to being a Republican, and we all get disappointed again. So she's a constant roller coaster for us, but she shouldn't be that unusual, right? We used to have a Republican Party that had principled people who would vote their conscience, and that's all she is. She's not terribly green or other things, but she just has a conscience and occasionally votes it. Unfortunately, that stands out in this Republican Party. Yeah, I mean, I think we have to have a path for those Republicans who, in their private moments, talk to people and say, oh yeah, this is horrible, to come over. Like, it's so split and the divide is so big. I guess we've kind of found a path over, and it's a path of us as Democrats and these moderate Republicans accomplishing things, which the other thing, the Republicans want to prove the government doesn't work, and they get in and do it. We've got to prove that government works in a time of horrible division. And so we can't just keep pointing at them and saying they're the reason nothing is working. Yeah. We have to make things work.
No, it's a great point. And what do you think? Tell us how you're looking at next year. There's a lot of still in play. I mean, I just read an interview with Murkowski who said she still may run for governor next year. Yeah. She hasn't made a decision. So just walk us through, your state has one congressional seat, right? An at-large congressional seat. And we've got a very conservative MAGA senator up for re-election. And so just walk us through what next year looks like for you and how you're looking at it.
Yeah, and it's the reason I'm here. I was going to retire with my wife and run away, and then we had the loss, and we have a potential in 26 for big. So we have only one House seat. I got a letter from a good D who was like, maybe we should do what California does and gerrymander ours. Like, we got one seat. We can't mix that any other way. But we got one House. It's always up. We have Senator Dan Sullivan, who, as you said, horrible MAGA, following right along with Trump. And then we have a governor's seat. And the big dog up here, we're big sled doggers. The big dog up here is Mary Peltola. She's still deciding, and some of my Democrats are frustrated with that. What I tell them is, she's run 2 races in the last 4 years and lost a husband. Give her a little time to make this decision. But she's fabulous. She's trying to decide. I think it's leaning Senate, but I don't know, and she'll let us know probably in the next 2 months. We have great state senator Tom Begich, who declared for governor, and we're excited about that. He has said if Mary decides to run for governor, he'll do something else. He'll help and do something else. And then we have an open U.S. House seat. So we think we can have the opportunity to maybe take back our state. As I said, we have these coalitions, and if we could add a good governor, we could really start to get things done and do our part to save American democracy by maybe flipping that Senate seat. I think that 6 months ago, Dan Sullivan's Senate seat looked really out of reach, probably. And then he's been so following the line of Trump. So he hasn't had a meeting here, a town hall, in years. He's just been hiding out and doing MAGA, and it's really hurt his popularity. And so a really popular Mary Peltola against Dan could be a really fun matchup.
Well, I know that the Senator Schumer and the Senate Democrats are working over Mary really hard.
That's right. Calls every week. Yeah.
Because, and they even have ads up now to show that, we featured an ad that one of the Senate super PACs is running in Alaska right now against Dan Sullivan on tariffs. Very good ad, I think, by the way, very effective, and showing that they're putting money in, and that that if she gets in, that this is real. And I can tell you, as a DC guy, right? I'm very close to many of the political people around, in the Senate world, and this is real for them. I mean, this is not a head fake. This is not, Senator Schumer wants to win the Senate back. He even said in an interview today that he was asked if he's going to run for re-election in 2028. And he said, my North Star is winning the Senate back in 2026. We'll worry about my re-election after. It was an uncharacteristically humble statement by Senator Schumer, to be honest. But it reflected the reality of where his head's at, which is that, they got Roy Cooper, a great recruit in North Carolina, who did not need to do this. I mean, Roy Cooper had been in elected office for 24 years in North Carolina and could have gone off and done many other things. We were able to recruit Sherrod Brown in Ohio, making Ohio possible. We've got an array of wonderful candidates running in Maine right now, another state that we need to try to make competitive. We've got good candidates getting into Iowa as well. And I think that we really are, I think that the party committee, the DSCC and the Senate Democrats are really serious about going all in Alaska. And so, it's, as a DC Democrat, I know that for you, it may be better to have her as governor for the real impact she can have. But, nationally, selfishly, we hope she runs for the Senate. And can you talk a little bit about, one of the things you and I discussed in Little Rock is that I don't think people really understand around the country. And we've had Ken Martin on and Jane Kleb on to talk about, the need to fund state parties and in that. But if we raise in our project $50,000 for you in the next few months, can you talk about what that means for a small state like Alaska, a party that has never really had national investment, from Democrats across the country? What would you do with that money? What would it mean to you? What can you do to explain to people how important this could be to make it possible for us to make that seat competitive next year, if and when Mary gets in?
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And you're absolutely right, Jane and Ken. That was where Ken came from. You've always emphasized that, and we really appreciate it. I think the DNC sometimes, without that pressure, forgets about state parties, and we can be where the rubber hits the road, where the off-cycle registration and structure, where everything that keeps it going when the spotlight isn't on. And I think we're learning as Democrats how we're just going to concentrate on 7 swing states. So we're narrowing where we talk to people, to Pennsylvania and others, right? And we narrowed traditionally the time we talk to people. We'll talk to them for 6 months in election year. And it just doesn't work. We have to campaign all year long, on off years, and we have to do it everywhere. And that's tough because there's a reason we avoided these places. Some of them are really unpleasant for Democrats. But if you leave them, you leave these deserts where everyone thinks they're MAGA. When I talk, fundraising or talking to my Democrats here and in tough districts, and they'll say something like, I'm the only Democrat in X. And you're like, no, you're not. We don't win there. 75-25, 70-30, but you line 10 people up on a fence, 3-4 of them are Democrats. You just don't feel that way. And it creates this MAGA universality or whatever, as though they're the only story in town. So what these investments allow us to do is start the things we need to do all the time. And we've learned that lesson, and we're the ones that start it now. So I started when I first got in, even though I didn't really have the money to do it, an effort that is every month reaching out to Democratic or progressive voters we lost, lazy or low propensity, the various names for it, lost Democrats is what I call it, but they stopped voting. And we're trying to figure out, if you, obviously that's not you, Simon, but we call and say, Simon, we noticed that, what's going on? And we just listen for a while. And they tell us really a different story than our core supporters. They talk about economic issues. They talk about they're busy and they don't think we're listening to them. They say things that we don't often hear. And then we may, a month or two later, we may call back and say, well, there's a local election. Would you vote in that one? We want to get them back on.
Right.
So we can do things like that. We ourselves, as we preach, hey, come to Alaska. We know it's tough, but don't stay in Pennsylvania. We're going to practice what we preach. And so we're going to our toughest districts. We are running candidates in all of them. If you think parts of your state are tough, come to tough parts of my state. They're really tough. And we've been listening to candidates about what would it take to have you do it. What we don't want to do there is overpromise, right? We say, Simon, run, and we'll give you all the support in the world. And then it's not our targeted seat. We're probably not going to win it. But we need to show the flag there. So what we're really trying to do is have a much more rational conversation with our candidates in tough seats. But though 50,000, our total budget is in the 400,000s on an off year. In a merry year where it rains money for a Senate race, but that all kind of goes to advertising. In terms of infrastructure and staff and those programs where we reach out and pull those progressives back, I got to start it now. And 50,000 allows me to do that where I might have to turn off the spigot in a couple of months.
Listen, I think part of what we learned last cycle is that, we went into North Carolina very early with Anderson Clayton, and we raised over $1 million just for the North Carolina Democratic Party.
Great.
But what she did with that money is she built an entirely separate North Carolina funded field operation to augment and to build around what was being done at the presidential level. And Anderson came on and spoke to us and said that field operation was a central reason why we did so well down ballot. It was of those 7 battleground states, we did the best down ballot in North Carolina of any of the states last cycle. And so this is an example, folks, where, giving, one of the reasons that I'm such a big proponent of giving to state parties is that it's affecting all the candidates in the state, right? I mean, we won in North Carolina, we won 5 out of the 10 statewide, elections, cabinet elections last cycle. We broke the supermajority. We won Allison Riggs's race. So the investments made there were not for a single candidate. It had this cascading effect across the entire state. And as you pointed out, and I love, Chairman Croft, the way that you described about those lonely districts and lonely Democrats that think they're all alone. And it's because we haven't organized everywhere. And so what happens is that people think that they are alone when they actually are one of many. And
they're not alone. They're outnumbered, but they're not alone. And
right. And that's a huge, I can just tell you, as having been in this business for a long time, that's a sea change in the way that we are approaching this election. And this is part of the Ken Martin, organize everywhere, win everywhere, whatever that line is. Right? I always screw it up, right? But is that, we have to be talking to everybody. And I think the other thing I just want to say for people who are watching is that there's 2 ways to do more, right? You can spend more money or you can go earlier. And going earlier is the best way to do more, because it gives guys like the chairman time to hire staff, to have them learn their jobs, to get experience before the shooting really starts, in the spring, summer, and fall. Our model, where we sort of drop all these staff in starting in the late spring and summer, is a high risk, low return model. And what we really need is to bring core staff on in the off year, to let them get their sea legs underneath them, to let them learn their jobs, right? I mean, to let them get better and to make mistakes, right? When people aren't paying that much attention. And so this early money, as Emily's list, pioneered this concept, it really, really matters.
Oh, totally. Yeah, absolutely, Simon. And, just take the field sorry, example that you mentioned, right? If Mary does run for Senate, and then there's going to be this avalanche of people and into the state. We're a small state, and that can, if we don't set that up right and build the structure right, it can turn from positive almost to negative. There were people, in parts of Philadelphia, but we saw it in Mark Begich's race when he was running for re-election and almost made it. But people were pissed by the end. They'd been knocked on 3 times. We've got to set up the way, and there are ways that you approach rural Alaska, native Alaska, that is different. So we want to set up the structures now that can be filled out, but appropriately, instead of just bombarded in, right? Like when I talk to state chairs, and that's the other, another reason why state chairs are important. When I talk to state chairs from Ohio with the Sherrod Brown, or where a bunch of money came in, they emphasize to me that lesson of, you got to create the capacity and the appropriate approach to your people, and then let them fill it out. That's great when they come in, but they can often come in not knowing how to do it. And that can either be not as effective as you want, or in some cases, we'd had people just, I don't want to talk to you people. I've been knocked on 5 times a day for 2 weeks.
Listen, there is, for those who are watching, I mean, I started my career as a field organizer and then graduated up to headquarters. And it's like in the military, right? I mean, the battle between headquarters and field, or the national campaign and the locals, right? This is an ancient war that goes on. And part of the reason after having done this for a very long time, I'm a huge believer in this structural capacity of the state party level, for the exact reason the chairman just described, which is that it's far more likely, if the state party is strong, that this partnership between the national campaign and the locals will be successful. What happens when the state parties are weak and you have people from outside making decisions, the chance of things going off kilter and creating resentment goes up through the roof. And it's why, if we really do want to win in red states and red places and win our majority back and grow and expand as a party, we have to fund the state parties. There's sort of no alternative to this, in sort of this, and the way that we sort of drop in and come in late is, it leaves no infrastructure behind, right? But also it has a high likelihood of failure as opposed to a high likelihood of success. And we just have to be smarter than that as we go forward.
Yeah, completely. I also like, and it's a little subtle, I think you and I touched on a little in that wide-ranging short conversation we had in Little Rock. I like what it does for the party itself. That is, when we reach out to voters we've lost, progressive voters who stopped, when we reach out in tougher seats and tougher districts and actually listen, we hear the message the Democratic Party probably by definition, almost should be listening to, right? If you take a progressive voter you lost and really listen to them, then maybe you don't lose them anymore. Like, you stop losing them. And so it both has a functional element. I maybe get that lost voter back, but I also hear a different style of progressive, a different style of Democrat. They're more focused on economic issues, pocketbook. They speak a little differently than maybe your core or DNC members at a DNC meeting speak. And I think at its simplest level, we got beat by a horrible troll of a man. And when you test our policies without a label, they like ours. And when you test their policies without a label, they don't like theirs. So you don't have to be, again, a rocket scientist to realize, it must be how you are communicating them. If they like your policies and you got your ass kicked, then it must be how you are talking about it, right?
Well, and one of the things that Jane and I actually had a conversation with Jane this week. We caught up a little bit. And one of the things we talked about is that when parties go year round, because there are parties that are well-funded and go year round, and and they're operating 24/7, 365, what happens is that it creates a virtuous cycle, right?
Yeah.
Is that you're talking to voters, they believe you're alive. It brings more activity, breeds activity, right? It allows you to raise more money because people feel your presence, right? You get more volunteers. And so part of what this money does is that it kicks off a virtuous cycle in states that we need to start now. And it is really, as Jane was saying, she's in the process of raising, she hopes, between $1 and $2 million to augment the DNC investments in the state parties.
She told us that recently. It was good news. Yeah.
Yeah. And she's working her ass off. But I think this, for people who are still new to this and sort of figuring out, is this a worthwhile investment? We have a small number of year-round, well-funded parties. I just was in Minnesota and did an event with the DFL in Minnesota 2 nights ago.
They're the dream.
They're like, I mean, it's amazing how, well run. That is, Ken Martin left behind an incredibly functional party, but they're operating year round, and it means their presence in communities is there. It's very different, right, than the parties that only have enough resources to really turn on in the last 5 or 6 months of an election cycle. And so, this is really important. Let me ask you one last thing before I let you go, Mr. Chairman, is that what are you hearing on the ground? I mean, what is on people's minds right now? I mean, what's it's September of the odd year, but how are people responding to Trump? The economy, what are people thinking about?
Yeah, I think you're seeing a slow shift, and we were frustrated that it didn't happen sooner, but they're amongst the people we're trying to convince. At one of these conventions, there was a comms training, and it was it's a mix of stuff, but that one was very good. They talked about a focus group who was of independents to describe Democrats one word. For the Republicans, they described crazy. They got it. They got that this was insane stuff. But for the Democrats, they described preachy is the word they came out with. And so that they felt like we were talking down to them. And some of the election might be explained by, if that's the tone we're taking, you might, as a rational independent voter, say, well, I don't think this crazy stuff is going to work, but I'm kind of tired of being talked down to, so I'm going to give it a try. And the sense I'm getting is that those I'm going to give it a tryers are like, well, this isn't working out very well. We are at our best as progressives when we are going somewhere. I think the word is chosen well. We progress. We move forward towards a goal. The best leaders, Clinton, Obama, talked about where they were taking us, not how bad shit was where we are or whatever. It was, we are a shark and we need to swim. And so we need to move forward. And the challenge now is they're realizing this ain't working. They took a shot on something that ain't working. They're not liking what they're seeing. If we can give them a positive vision and we can convince them that we can do it, I think they'll choose again. We as Democratic partisans can't understand sometimes an independent who could go one way or the other, but you might take a flyer on something you thought was kind of crazy for various reasons. We need to convince them this is a better choice next time. And we need to start now, as you said.
Amen to that. It's a great way to end. And listen, we're glad to be in partnership with you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And folks, listen, whatever you can, our focus today, it's September, is on winning New Jersey, winning Virginia, winning the Yes on 50 campaign in California. Those are the big priorities in the short term in order for us to win the fall. But we can do more than one thing at a time. And we need to make these early investments. This money, if we can raise our target by the end of the year, it's going to make a huge difference in these states and make it far more likely that we can flip the Senate in 2020.
We will put it to good use. I promise people it is money that will go far in Alaska.
Well, Chairman, I'm going to have you back every few months to get an update on your progress.
Tell you what we're doing.
You're going to become part of our family, a character in our story. And Anderson Clayton, I think, spoke to us 6 times in 2024, and we'll have you back. And listen, good luck. And thank you for signing up for this critical work at a critical time for the country.
Thank you so much, Simon. We'll be in touch.
Okay. See you, everyone. Listen, learn about what I'm calling our Audacious Expansion Fund. Audacious because we want to have the audacity to try to flip the Senate in 2026 with these early investments. And audacious because we also have to start making investments, structural, large investments in Texas and Florida because of the changing electoral college map. These are hard things to do. They're hard, but they're not impossible. But unless we try, they won't come up, they won't happen. So our goal here is to win the fall, but also to start putting things in motion that will be really important for us next year and in the years to come. And so thank you for being part of this, and thanks for being part of the Hopium community. See you, everybody.